I sat there for a solid 20 minutes with the text message that read, "Well, that makes two of us because you hurt me too." There were some more words spoken and more feelings hurt. And you know, what I had to say was just not meant to tear anyone down. If it was meant to tear anyone down, it was myself. To show what God can do with a person, what He can do to turn him around, and you know, all that stuff. You know, any experience I go through, I don't fully blame anyone for for what goes wrong in my life, or I guess you could even say right, for that matter. You know, I don't blame anybody for anything. If I blame anyone, I always blame myself. That being said, it was a hard pill to swallow, but I just let it go. There was no rectifying that in the moment, and there was no mending of the fence anytime soon. But from that moment, I knew that I owed her an apology or some sense of clarity. I didn't know how long it was going to take, but I knew an apology was in order. You know, as much as that got to me, all the mean text and stuff, I said, you know what? I choose joy in this moment. I choose not to be sad anymore. And so, I wasn't. For the first time, possibly ever, I felt myself. And you know, in hindsight, right now, that's all I've ever wanted. As of now, I am my own man, and I think my own thoughts, and no one can take that away from me. In my past, anyone could take that away from me. If I wanted the influence, if I let the influence take over. No one can take it away from me now. No one can take away Levi Atkins. And that's pretty darn cool. So anyway, I moved forward, and I moved on. But like I said, I knew I owed her an apology. And I knew it from the moment, not only after the texting debacle, but there was a night in church when my pastor, he read this verse, and it says, "If you have a problem with your brother or sister, leave your gift at the altar and go make amends with them, and then come and present your offering." So from that, I've known that, yeah, I owed an apology. You know, this had to be rectified. Just not then. You know, as a matter of fact, I was like, okay, this is February of 2014, so I'm like, okay, the 14th hasn't come up yet, so I want to make it super lovey-dovey and stuff. But in my heart, I'm like, first of all, this apology isn't ready. And second of all, we're not trying to date again, you know. So we're gonna leave well enough alone right now. And we're gonna let the apology be put on, you know, the heart first, instead of the mind. So I was like, okay, we'll just give it a minute. And so I did. Like I said, it was the new steps, or the first steps in becoming my own man. From there, you know, I actually was still with Walmart, and I actually got a raise and a promotion. Now, if you watch number 4 of this testimony series, you know I was on the brink of termination. So I had come quite a long way in my journey with Walmart. And so the promotion was cart pusher, obviously, is, well, I was going to say it was the bottom of the bottom as far as positions go, but, you know, that fight would probably be with custodial work. But then again, I don't know if they get paid anymore for that. So, anyway, it's a neck and neck battle between the bottom of the bottom. But anyway, I had got a promotion, so to say, to unloader. And so I'm like, you know what? I guess I'm going to stick around here for a while. You know, because ever since I graduated high school, I'm like, I got to get out. Got to get out into a different state, and I got to start a life. But that's someone else's dream. That was someone else's dream for my life. That wasn't mine. But little did I know that at the time. Because at that time I was like, okay, let's save up, and we're going to save up these earnings, and we're going to go to school on that. So I started this job. 2 weeks before I started, I got this interesting email, which I'll explain that story a little further on down the road of this series. But I got an email from a camp called Glorietta, and they were like, "Hey, you want to come work for us?" And I'm like, "Why not? I'll at least put in my application. If they accept me, okay, I know I can do this thing, and somewhere down the road, I'm going to be accepted into one of these future student life-esque camps, So it turns out I got accepted. Right as I'm, being an unloader. From the first day of it, my coworkers knew that I was going to be leaving. I wasn't going to be with them a long time. I just didn't exactly know when the time would be up, per se. So they're like, okay. To put it frank, this job was awful. Now, I mean, I've done my share of oddball jobs, at this current moment. I can say that with full assurance. But not to say it's an oddball job. It's quite a common, place for many people. And some people make their livelihood off this, and that's fine. Great job. But, that being said, not for me. Firstly, the pay was great, and the hours were great for what I was getting. I was still part-time, but I maxed out at 32 hours. Or minimal 32 hours. And so 3 days off a week, 4 days working, that sounds great with me, And $8.45 an hour, that's not bad. That's good money right there. So I had that going for me. But, money's not the driving force in my life. If you really know me, you know that about me. Because number one, we don't take it when we leave, and that's the bottom line. So I'm not saying go squander your money. Don't squander your earnings. Be smart about it. Save for what you need and buy for what you need. Don't squander. But anyway, that's a different lesson for a different day. The point being, you gotta do what you gotta do. To quote a Futurama reference, from the beginning, my coworkers kind of adapted around me when I was a cart pusher. Like, they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I cussed," if they let out a curse word or something. And so they kind of got used to that, which is very flattering, that I was able to grow such great bonds with my coworkers that, they were respectful of my morals and my beliefs, because I in turn try to do the same for them, just accommodate to, or make them feel comfortable. But this is a different story. You go somewhere new, you're going to start new. I always try to maintain that level of respect I carry for others I don't know. Because, like I've said before, everyone's an open book. Well, not an open book, but everyone is a book. Everyone's got their own story. Everyone's got their own upbringing. Everyone's got their own past. So, you got to be respectful towards that. From the very get-go, when people screw up here and there, here come the curse words. Here come the tearing down of others. I mean, we've all been there before, but it's never a pretty sight. It's like a train wreck every single time. And I'm just like, well, here we go. This is going to be fun. And the worst part about it is, since I knew I had that job, and I know I wasn't going to stick around long, I'm like, how can I invest? How can I invest here? And that was a discouragement from the beginning, that I didn't think I had much time. And the very first night I did that job, it was very odd. Because, I mean, you start off any job in training, I mean, you're not going to know what to do. And so here I am. I'm scrambling. I'm scatterbrained. And these folks are like, they're not saying it to my face, But there's murmurings, and they're like, "Oh man, he's got to do this and that," and I'm just like, I'm doing what I can, but I don't know what to do. So, true story. They actually I think it was one or two of them. They went to the manager and tattled. And so the manager, he comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, I know that you don't know what to do, but you need to do it." Which is a profoundly intelligent sentence on its own. But I'm like, alright, I'm not playing this game, Like, I'm being serious now. And I'm like, I'm not playing this game. I don't need this position. I make just as much being a cart pusher, and I have no problem going back to that position. Keep your idle threats, because you're not going to write me up. You're not going to do anything. And that's that, man. You can't punish me for something I don't know to do. So, I mean, there was that's how the beginning of that journey started. And, as a manager, you say such an asinine thing. I mean, what do you expect? Like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'll know what to do." No, it doesn't work that way. So, I mean, that's just the Walmart hierarchy, I guess you could say. Like, everyone thinks they're a king over there, or a queen for that matter. But that's a different story for a different day. But the point is, I was like, man, this is going to be quite a trip. Fast forward, weeks going on. I did this job for about the course of a month. It was very discouraging. For one, it's a third shift job, and I'm not a third shift man. I wake up in the morning, go to bed at night, and sleep. Of course, that's all preference, and that's all first world problems, I guess you could say. But the fact of the matter is, that's just me. And I'd grown accustomed to having my biblical study time laid out. Like I said, you may hear that and you're like, "Oh, that's no problem. Why can't you adapt to that?" It was something that's going to take time. And that's not necessarily any time I had, especially with this job coming up. And so I was so discouraged. So, all that stuff going on, I think God was still calling me to that, even though it was such a short-lived time. And I was just wondering how I could invest into such hardened of the hardened, I don't know, people. But still, talks of religion came up. And, there's some people like, I don't know what I believe. And that's by the way, that's just the dumbest. If you're trying to impress a theologian, I guess I can call myself a theologian. If you're trying to impress a theologian by saying, if you're trying to sound smart when you say, "Oh, I don't know what I believe yet, my family's Christian, but, I'm kind of like, I don't know what to believe yet." And some of you out there know exactly what that is, in terms of, I've come across a person who has said this, that, man, number one, you're showing how lost you are, in some cases how dumb you are, if you're trying to impress somebody with that talk, because it's not an impressive talk. So it's either a thing of concern, or where you're like, okay, this is what you should believe, or two, it's like, hey, you need to believe this. We as Christians, we need to take a grasp of that and not be like, "Oh, King James only, you need this Bible in your life, son," because that's the fastest way you're going to turn someone away. And the thing about it is, it's something that must be taken time with, because we don't do any of that work. It's something we got to coast with. It's something we got to ride with. That's not a pass to be passive. We work with it. We jive with it. We do as we're told. And so, in hopes that person can come to a knowledge of the belief that is the truth. Even though it was such a short-lived journey, so to say, it was great just to have the experience that I did. I don't regret doing it, but I'll go on record and say I'll never do it again. If it comes to, hey, you work third shift or you're homeless, I'll probably go homeless, to be honest with you. It was awful. I ended up getting my my fly-in date for Glorietta, and so I put in a 4-week notice, and I actually had like an epiphany with Jesus one night. And so I had put that 4-week notice in, and I got sick like over the course of 2 days. And I actually called in one night, and on this night I'm just throwing up. So I'm like, you know what? Since I'm up, I'm going to read the Bible, which, you know, that time had been cut into. And I came across the passage, you know, where Jesus is saying foxes have holes, you know, and all that, but the Son of Man has no place to lie his head. And, you know, he wraps up that thing with, anyone who puts his hand to the plow and looks back isn't fit for the kingdom of God. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm looking back. You know, I really got to get my my butt in gear here. I gotta go. I gotta prepare for when I'm going out to New Mexico. And so I call up my boss and I'm like, hey man, I hate to do this, but I gotta quit. I have to quit now. And, you know, I've tried to explain it to him. And if you watched number 4 of this series, like, you would at least have an understanding that, okay, this guy, he understands. He's a nice guy. Oh, man, we dealt with a different guy this time, and it was hilarious looking back on it. But I was kind of really sad at the time when this happened. So I'm like, hey, man, I got to quit. And I really hate to say that, but I don't really know another way to put it, and I don't want to sugarcoat it or anything. And he said, oh, so you were faking the other night? And I'm like, no, man. Like, I said, listen, I was reading my Bible, you know, last night, and before I could say anything, he was like, I don't remember anywhere in the Bible where it says, you know, don't finish out what you said you were going to finish. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't really like how you're talking to me right now. And he goes, well, I don't like what you're doing right now. And he's like, we're done, goodbye. And hangs up the phone. I'm like, man, my 50-something-year-old boss is acting like a total kid. And I get it, you know. I said 4 weeks and I did 2 weeks, but as far as I'm concerned, I was okay with. I would not have been okay with it otherwise. But they had found my replacement and all that jazz, and so, you know, it carried no bearing on my heart. But, you know, I burned a bridge in the process, but that was okay, because I was going on to greener pastures, or in this case, dirtier pastures, in the form of the wild, wild west that is Glorietta, New Mexico. One book closed, which was Walmart, and that was my livelihood. And here we go into something I had no idea what I was getting myself into.